Good day. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Montreal, Canada for Reason to Resist on January 13th, 2026. In these tumultuous times, we are pleased to be joined again by our friend and comrade Laith Marouf from Beirut, Lebanon. Laith is the executive director of Free Palestine TV that does extraordinary and quite courageous reporting on the ground in Lebanon. And for those of you who are not familiar with Free Palestine TV, and at the end of this, we'll ask Laith to tell you how you can watch it, but we do encourage you to, take in and benefit from it's really vitally important resistance reporting. Thank you for joining us again today, Laith.
Great to be with you, Dimitri.
So, Laith, it's been quite a start to 2026. And, as I mentioned to you before we began today, I want us to have a wide-ranging discussion about all of these extraordinarily dangerous events that are happening around the world. And let's start with Iran. After days of really horrifying violence in various Iranian cities, I mean, we've heard accounts of people being burned alive, beheaded, a 3-year-old girl killed, mosques set on fire, and so forth. The Iranian people took to the streets yesterday in huge numbers, and let's just have a look at some footage that was shot of the demonstration in Tehran. And this is from the website of the Australian newspaper, the Sun Herald, but it was footage shot by the Iranian state broadcaster IRIB.
لبیک یا خامنه‌ای لبیک یا حسینا.
Now, Laith, this of course is just Tehran. There were other huge protests in other cities, and this one could well have been, could well have consisted of more than 1 million people, certainly hundreds of thousands, as you'll see this footage, from this footage. They filled up a major boulevard that cuts through the center of Tehran for kilometers, and many of them were on the side streets as well. This is the boulevard that I'm referring to. I think you'll agree with me, Laith, that this story is far from over, but it does appear that the regime change artists have suffered a serious setback after days of brutal violence. What's your take on what has happened here and where things currently stand?
Yeah, the lowest estimates for those pro-government demonstrations is 7 million over that day. So clearly, at least 10% of the population of Iran was out in the streets against the violence being perpetrated by agents of the West and the Zionist entity. Before these demonstrations came out in the streets, the Iranian government had to do a lot of important work that made it safe for the people to be out in the streets, as we see here. So as those demonstrations began, we saw within a few days the Handala hacking group release all the information hacked from the telephone and computers of the Mossad executive that runs the Iran desk. And in that information that was released, we saw the names and pictures of every agent under direct control of this Mossad operative. And this information being released to the public wouldn't have happened before already the Iranian government had moved against these agents. Okay, so thousands of agents of the Zionists were rounded up in the first 48 hours of the troubles. And then we saw right after that, in order to flush out any agents that were not on this list, those that are operated by Germany, France, the UK, the US, Azerbaijan, others, okay? the Iranian government cut all communication in the country, telephones, landlines, cell phones, internet, and that allowed the Iranian intelligence to kind of sweep the country to find any transmissions using satellite phones and or Starlink. And they let the Starlink and the satellite phones operate for a few days to pinpoint them, which they did. And then they moved on to the third stage, which is total jamming of satellite communication. And for the first time in history, we see a successful blackout of the vast majority of Starlink capabilities over any country in the world. So those are things that had to happen before the populace in Iran were safe enough to come out and stand for their opinions. And we saw those videos, of course, together just now, and there's hundreds of interviews of people in the streets, people of all kinds of backgrounds and social status or political backgrounds and positionalities, women with or without hijab, that are out in the streets condemning the violence being perpetrated by those who are loyal to the imperialists and the Zionists in the streets of Iran.
Now, there has been open acknowledgement on the part of some Israeli and U.S. officials that the Mossad has had a hand in orchestrating these anti-government protests. And here you can see a report from the Jerusalem Post a couple of days ago saying that Mossad spurs Iran protests, says agents with demonstrators in Farsi message. Now, the Iranian government has openly expressed or warned that it could engage in a preemptive strike against Israel. And it seems to me, with such statements being made by Israeli officials, this is clearly just another element in the multifaceted war that Israel and the United States are waging on Iran, that they now have, well, not that they needed a further justification to attack Israel, but they now have ample evidence that the aggression has been revived. Do you think, based on what you're hearing and seeing, that this is a serious possibility, a preemptive strike against the genocidal entity?
It's a very big possibility. Looking at the Iranian military movements over the last 2 weeks, there was indications that the Iranians are preparing for either to be attacked at that moment or to have to launch their own preemptive attack. So again, over the last 2 weeks, the Iranian government declared no-fly zones almost on all the borders, unusual, with all the radars being activated across the whole country, movement of all the air defense systems and the missile forces into positions of readiness, full readiness into action. So this means right now, since that moment was called by the Iranian military, all the Iranian military structures are at the highest alert, basically at operational levels. And so we don't know, of course, if the Zionists are going to do the first strike and or if Iran this time will do the first strike. I think they've learned a lot from what happened over the last 2 years and what happened around the 12-day war with the Zionist and American involvement last time. So there's going to be different strategies played out. I don't think the Iranians will wait. Look at, by the way, Trump's tweet or post just an hour ago, as we are getting onto this recording, calling on the Iranian people to go back to the streets and to take over government offices, that the Americans are on the way, help is on the way. This is a tweet by Trump. So it's not only the Zionists that are saying, we're there for you, we're here, go ahead, burn down the country. It's America is now, in the name of the emperor himself, saying these things. Look, everybody knows that the colored revolution hasn't worked in Iran, and the agents on the ground are defeated. So if the American empire, Zionist empire, wants to do anything, it has to become a war. And unfortunately, because of how badly Venezuela performed in its war, the United States is back now with full capabilities to concentrate on Western Asia. Me, as a Palestinian, as an axis of resistance supporter, I hoped that Venezuela wouldn't fall, or at least the government of Venezuela wouldn't fall in 2.5 hours, that it will lead to some lift of pressure off Western Asia. But it seems like the empire now is coming back to full concentration on Western Asia.
Now, I'd like to talk to you today, Laith, about the question of how people like you and me, anti-imperialists who live in the West, should be dealing with the current situation in Iran. Now, there are certainly indications that although there were rioters who were in some way, shape, or form collaborating with Israel and the United States, one or the other or both, and who engaged in horrific violence, there are certainly indications that Iranian security forces killed some innocent protesters. It's very difficult to know exactly how many and in what circumstances these people died. Quite apart from that, over the years, there have been legitimate complaints that have been leveled against the Iranian government in various respects, whether it's economic mismanagement, corruption, human rights abuses, and so forth. And I raise this subject, Laith, reluctantly because I feel obliged to do so, having heard in recent days from anti-imperialists here in Canada some rather strident criticism being directed at the government of Iran. And what I'd like to talk to you about now is the utility of people, anti-imperialist leftists, what have you, living in the West, who are opposed to the regime change efforts of Western governments, but at the same time are publicly condemning the Iranian government, the wisdom of that, the utility of that. And I'd like to start our discussion on this subject by asking you about the case of Syria. I've been thinking a lot about this in the last few days, and I'm not going to hide the fact that I'm very frustrated with anti-imperialists and leftists, people who describe themselves as such, living in the West, who are condemning Iran's government at this particular moment when it's screamingly obvious what the West is trying to do. And my recollection, it wasn't that long ago, Laith, no one better than you to talk about this, is that once that Bashar al-Assad fled Syria and al-Jolani, the Western-backed terrorist, was installed as the new tyrant of Syria, that Israel bombed the bejesus out of the country. It just went hog wild because now there was no effective air defense. The Syrian military had disintegrated, was in disarray. And for months, as I recall, the genocidal entity was just brutalizing the country with aerial attacks. And of course, as we know, its forces, its ground forces, exploited the situation by moving into southern Syria, confiscating land there. There's no indication that they're going to leave anytime soon, if ever. They, of course, have claimed now Mount Hermon. They have annexed the Golan Heights. And on top of all of that, even though there is a Washington vassal in power in Damascus, the Americans have joined in and are bombing Syria. And in fact, the strikes are being described as the Western press is quite heavy. So you have both the Americans and the Israelis bombing the bejesus out of this devastated country when they have someone, the person of their dreams effectively in power in Damascus doing whatever Washington dictates, it seems. And so I started thinking about what would happen if this regime change initiative or project in Iran actually succeeded so that the government fell and the Iranian military disintegrated. What would the Americans and the Israelis do at that point, in your opinion, Laith? Would they adopt an approach similar to what they've done in Syria? Or would they allow some new government to form and leave the country to pursue its own future?
Well, obviously, the primary objective of the Zionist and the imperialist, when they are, trying to take over a country, is not only changing the government to become pro-imperialist, but it's also to fragment every society they, have control of, to pieces that are impossible ever again to compete and or challenge the authority of the Zionist and the imperialist man. So, as we see in Syria, it's not going to be only a total attack and destruction of the military capabilities of Iran. If the Iranian government falls, yes, the Zionists and the imperialists will bomb the hell out of all the military facilities of Iran and all their scientific complexes, military or not, their computer centers in universities, their medicine centers, their everything is that is of scientific and cultural value will be destroyed. And Iran will be broken up, as Syria is being broken up, into ethnic, religious, linguistic cantons that will be unable to be sustainable, and thus will have to be beggars forever, okay? And so Iran will be broken up to 7-8 countries, okay, with like the Arabic peoples, the Luris, the Baluchis, the Kurds, the Azeris, the Tajikis, okay? They will break it up and make Iran a landlocked country, the Persian part of Iran, okay? And with no oil, okay? So this is what the West will work on. This is what the Zionists will work on, to make sure that the last standing Muslim country that is not outside of direct control of the United States and the Zionists, and has the capabilities to compete, to never ever exist again. Okay, that's what the primary objective of the Zionist is, and the imperialist. And about those leftovers in the West that today are parroting the imperialist talking points in their critique of the Iranian government. Listen, if the United States is the country that has imprisoned more people on this planet than any other country, 25% of all prisoners in the world are inside the United States. It's like something like 5 times the number of that in China, which is a population 5 times the population of the United States. This is the largest imprisoned population in the history of humanity. Okay? Not 10 years, not post-war war, no, in history of humanity. There is more people killed by police in the United States than any other country on the planet, with or without demonstrations, colored revolutions, or what have you. Okay, there's a a higher percentage of possibility of killing by the police in the United States than any other society on this planet and in history of humanity. When these leftovers in the West call for armed revolution against the American government, the American regime, and carry arms and burn down churches and synagogues and ministries and police offices in the United States, when they do that, they may have partial right to say anything about any other regime, quote unquote, and its treatments of its population or the violence that it emits in the streets on its own citizens. This is the first step that they have to do before they can open their mouth about Iran or other places. The second step, because even with that, this will not be full permission, will not give them full permission to talk about any other society. Why? Because they are part of an imperialist domain. A country like Canada that is crucial in the colonization and the dispossession and the genocide of masses of people in Africa, Latin America, and Asia. Okay? Once they understand their positionality, that they are belonging to a population that is guilty of benefiting from this, and once they rebel against that and their state ceases to be a crucial component of an imperialist project, maybe they can discuss like me and you about everybody else. I come from a population like Syrian and Palestinian that, goddamn, we have no power over anybody else, let alone ourselves. So I can talk about any other society and what have you. But if I, as a Syrian, and the Syrian state somehow occupies France in the parallel happy world, okay, by the way, that would be lightning outside, then maybe I will have to stop talking about France, because I will come from an oppressive society that has a history of benefiting from the oppression of the French.
Yeah, I mean, personally, Laith, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that at this particular moment in the history of Iran, this great nation, that the only thing standing in the way of the utter destruction of the country, the dismemberment and destruction of the country, is the current government of Iran. And that's just the reality. Whether you like that government or don't like that government, if that government falls, Iran is finished as a country. It's utterly finished as a country. And this is something that I think, you know, these self-described anti-imperialists and leftists in the West are missing completely. They seem to be harboring some delusion that if the government falls, you know, the West is going to stand back and the Israelis are going to stand back and say, hey, now we're going to allow the Iranian people to determine their own future and to build a new country, a strong country, a prosperous country. No, that's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is they're going to do to Iran what they did to Syria. And I would think that what they're going to do to Iran is going to be even worse than what they did to Syria, because Iran is the country that has the potential to be it has the greatest potential to be sovereign and independent of U.S. and Israeli domination in the region. The size of the country, the resources of the country, the topography of the country. So they'll exploit the situation. If the government were to fall, I don't think it will, but if it were to fall, even more ruthlessly and cruelly than they have exploited the situation in Syria. And so in these circumstances, why would you be egging on people who are trying to bring down that government? I mean, that strikes me, you know, as insane if your actual goal is to protect the Iranian people and the nation of Iran. I mean, do you think I'm overstating the case in terms of you know, what is likely to transpire if the critics of this government achieve their objective of making it fall?
No. Of course, no. You're not overstating that. And I think I should also overstate why this is happening to the leftovers in the West. And I think it is because of latent, deep-seated racism. You know, look at how these leftover anti-imperialist circles in the West dealt with the fall of the Syrian government. I mean, even the ones that were, somehow on the good side before the fall of the Syrian government, that opposed the intervention, the vast majority of them immediately denigrated the Syrian military, who gave 400,000 martyrs to fight, to defend the country from imperialist intervention. For 15 years, stood in the face of a combined imperialist horde of 80 somewhat countries. Okay? They denigrated the Syrian army, the Syrian people, the Syrian president, the Syrian government. And those same leftovers that did that when Damascus fell, after a battle of somewhat 4 days with tens of thousands of soldiers dead, by the way, that everybody covered up. Okay, people that fought till the last minute. And you compare that to those same leftovers, how they treated the fall of Caracas and the capture of Maduro in 2.5 hours. These same leftovers, because of their latent, deep buried racism against Arabic and Muslim peoples, who had idolized President Maduro and the whole Latin left, South American left, because they speak Spanish, because they're partially European, inbred into European through colonization. They, saw that as the height of anti-imperialism. Not one of them opened their mouth to denigrate the Venezuelan military that didn't shoot one bullet against the invading American military, who lost their president in 2.5 hours. I was heartbroken when that happened to Venezuela, by the way, and to President Maduro. But believe me, I immediately saw the racism. I immediately recognized it. How this same left is still today standing up for the Venezuelan government, who is negotiating with Trump, the new vice president. And they have abandoned Syria as if it never existed, abandoned the Syrian people to their fate after we fought for 15 years and lost 500,000 people.
So I'd like to switch now to events in the United States, Laith. And first, I'd like to talk to you about a couple of episodes of commentary on what is happening in the world today that I watched last night in the alternative media. The first one was, I'm not going to repeat all of my criticisms of Scott Ritter, but I've had some disagreements with his commentary over the past few months, although I acknowledge that he's done many good things. And, over the course of his career, he's been saying some stuff about Donald Trump and about, the resistance in Palestine and so forth that got me rather worked up, and I stand by every criticism I leveled against him. And one of them was that he was sticking very stubbornly to this idea that Donald Trump genuinely wanted peace. And I don't know what prompted me to do it, but last night, because I kind of got fed up with this, I stopped watching Scott Ritter interviews. But last night I decided to watch one, and I hadn't watched Scott Ritter speak in quite a while. And it's interesting because something happened in that discussion which was really quite important, I think, in the evolution of his own thinking. He does have whatever you think of Scott, he has a large following on, in the alternative media, and he is an influential voice. And he started out, he was asked by Napolitano about recent events regarding the Trump regime. And he started out basically by apologizing for having clung to this notion that Trump was a peacemaker. And he said, you know, I've been accused of being naive. And he more or less admitted that he had been naive and had been taken up by the rhetoric and, you know, deceived by the rhetoric, the pro-peace rhetoric of Trump. But that now and then he just completely eviscerated Trump in every conceivable way, and said something that I've been saying for about a year now, which is that when Trump ran on a peace platform in 2024, he lied through his teeth. He was just straight up lying about wanting peace. It was all nothing but a craven, morally bankrupt effort to win the votes of Americans who were fed up with America's forever wars. And he never, ever had any intention of bringing those wars to an end. And in fact, he's done exactly the opposite. He started entirely new wars. So he admitted all of that, and that was kind of, I guess, gratifying to see. I think that's something that a lot of people in the alternative media who have been characterizing Donald Trump as a peacemaker, this is a sort of reckoning that they're all having to deal with now. But the part that really struck me about it was at the very end, he said that we have basically, our country has basically become Nazi Germany in the 1930s. I was like, whoa. Not that I disagree with him, but I was surprised to hear it said on this particular platform, and it said so forcefully. And then the very next thing I turned on, it just happened to pop up in my YouTube feed, Kyle Kulinski. And Kulinski, without any reference to Scott Ritter, I don't know whether he was even aware of the commentary that Scott had just offered. He said exactly the same thing. He said, we are now the Fourth Reich. I remember, you know, a year ago, you were saying that they were going to be rounding up Muslims and putting them into internment camps in the United States. In a way, what's happening now seems even potentially worse, because they're not targeting any particular, these ICE goons who look more and more like the SS. They're not targeting any particular religious group. They're now turning their guns even on, you know, white U.S. citizens, unarmed mothers. So I guess my question to you is, Laith, I think I know what the answer is, but I'm curious to know your thoughts about all of this. Do you think this is a fair characterization of the United States and more broadly Western countries? Do you think we now bear a striking resemblance to Nazi Germany in the 1930s?
Yeah, definitely. Look, you know, the United States has been on a rampage since the collapse of the Soviet Union, actually. Okay. And remember how people discuss World War II and what led to it. And it's about Germany beginning to occupy different countries until everybody said enough and attacked Germany. So the United States went on this rampage after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and it, you know, took down Yugoslavia, Iraq, Somalia, and then everything that happened since, quote unquote, the beginning of the war on terrorism, and now this new wave. So the expansion of the fascist empire began in 1990. It wasn't recognizable for people in the heartlands of the empire, like in Berlin, in London, in Paris, in Washington, in Ottawa. But now the empire has literally wiped out every opposition except those that have nuclear weapons and countries as big as Iran. So it's getting so serious, the war, that people are feeling, yeah, now I'm in a fascist state. Well, the United States was always a fascist state. It genocided millions of indigenous people, enslaved, and kills every day thousands upon thousands of. In every big city in the US, there's at least 1 or 2 black people killed every day by the cops in every major US state. Okay, fascism was there. Yes, now those who are quote unquote white are seeing it happen to them, and with the killing that we saw. And yes, these ICE troops are brown shirts. There's now a separation between what the police was doing before, killing minorities and so forth, to the point of right now, the brown shirts being brought in, and new force that is answerable to the president only is outside military structures. So it's a militia with an allegiance to the president. And as we see, the main targets right now are the Muslim/Black/Latino communities, and that is practically 30% of the population of the United States. Okay, like there was the wave of targeting Arabic and Muslims, then the wave of targeting Somalis, because they managed to be Black and Arabic and Muslim. And finally, the outright hunting of brown people is happening in the streets. You saw homes being crashed, schools, children being dragged out of schools, out of offices, work, people being killed in the streets left and right. So yes, fascism is in full force now in the heartlands. What Germany is doing to the demonstrators against the genocide is very similar, by the way, to how ICE is. They haven't killed anybody yet, but that's the only threshold that didn't cross in Germany. What France is doing, what the UK is doing, look at what Australia just did with that the literature festival, the Adelaide Literature Festival, where a Palestinian writer was banned, and then the vast majority, 80% of all of participants stepped away, which led to the collapse of the whole festival, and the premier of the province actually stepping in as the guy that's going to organize the festival and still justifying banning a Palestinian Australian writer, because some Zionists didn't want her to be there. So we're at the point of there's no more any art even being performed that's not going to be required for a Nazi, okay, Zionist, okay. Yeah, fascism is there, and I'm actually happy for it. I tell you something, as a Palestinian, as a person who lived all these imperialist wars, maybe all this fascism in the streets will awaken those leftovers that want Iran to be burnt down, Syria to be burnt down. Let's see, maybe they'll wake up when their girlfriends and boyfriends get rounded up by ICE. That was very close, that lightning. We're having an Arctic storm coming down from the Black Sea.
Looks like the heavens are reacting to your comments about fascism. I just want to share this little tidbit of news, which probably escaped the scrutiny of a lot of people. This is an article in Euronews in which the German defense minister, Boris Pistorius, is said to be deeply disturbed that an elite German paratrooper regiment has been involved in or allegedly involved in sexual assault, anti-Semitism, right-wing extremist activity, violent rituals, and drug use. And further down the article towards the end, it says that I do commend people to this article so they can understand exactly what's happening in the military of the Nazi Friedrich Merz. In my opinion, that's exactly what he is. The article says further down, this is not the first scandal to hit a German military unit. Similar issues have emerged in the Special Forces Command in the southern town of Kahl. Its structure is comparable to that of paratroopers, and the military intelligence found the warning signs of this unit had been ignored for years. According to the Bundestag, between 2017 and 2021, the service investigated around 50 cases of suspected right-wing extremism within this unit alone. And One high-profile case in 2020 involved Philip S., a sergeant, for some reason they don't give his full name, a sergeant major in the KSK's second company who stockpiled weapons, explosives, and right-wing literature at home. Interesting that they say right-wing literature. I suspect what that really means is Nazi literature. You know, Laith, I think it's perfectly fair to say that we are now ruled by Nazis in the West. You know, they wear bankers' suits rather than brown shirts. They don't goose step. They shake hands, read from teleprompters. They don't have little mustaches, but these are all just superficial inanities, which at the end of the day don't mean anything. The reality is, in substance, we're ruled by a Nazi cabal. I mean, am I missing something here, or aren't these people engaging in exactly the sorts of behavior that one would have expected of the Third Reich?
So look at it this way, you know, a country like Germany, where everything is free for you in terms of social services, free healthcare, free education, as long as you want, you know, cheap public transportation, whatever. And there's no forced recruitment into the military. Who's going to the military? Except somebody who's ideologically driven and or who wants to kill other people, who enjoys killing other people. You see? Mm-hmm. So this is the same of the Canadian government military, right? Who's going to be joining the Canadian military except somebody who really wants to kill other people or believes in the Canadian project. And that is a colonial concept. Mm-hmm. So this is what it is. Look at what we've been reading about who's joining ICE. They're literally letting in people with mental disabilities, people with psychological problems, people with criminal records, people with ideological positionalities that are extreme. And this is done on purpose. Like, for sure, if somebody did an investigation of the German police force, the special force that is attacking the Palestinian demonstrations in Germany, you will probably find the same kind of people, because to belong to a unit that's suppressing these demonstrations, it means you're ready to beat up women and children. And that's what they're doing. They're coming in and beating them to pulp in front of cameras and enjoying it. So clearly those who are in the German military or German police units that are used to suppress demonstrations and so forth are mainly Nazis, psychopaths, blood-hungry, rapists, child molesters, abusers. And that's the same that's happening with ICE. And this is going to be a really malleable force for Trump. If one of the governors decides to go full out against Trump, I'm sure he can depose them and drag them like he dragged Maduro, right? Mm-hmm. So we're in this position right now where there is a full fascist force that is not the regular fascism of the police in the United States, but is organized into an actual unit that is answerable to the dictator.
So in time remaining to us, I'd like to switch back to events in your part of the world, Laith. There have been a number of arguably indications that the other regional powers in West Asia, and here I'm referring specifically to Egypt, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, that they are, I'm trying to find the words that most accurately describe this, but they're beginning to unite in some form of resistance to Israeli hegemony over the region because they've come to believe that they themselves are at risk. So, for example, the Saudis are attacking, we're told, UAE forces or proxies of UAE in Yemen. We're told that the Turkish government actually assisted the Iranian government over the past few days by helping to identify Kurdish infiltrators from Iraq who were, participating in this regime change operation, who sought to participate. There are claims being made. I saw a report that an Egyptian naval vessel went into the waters of Gaza to kind of send a warning to the Israeli Navy, and they shot at it. The warning shots, they didn't actually try to destroy the vessel or damage it. And that, there are significant forces in the Sinai, Egyptian forces. And do you think that there has kind of been an awakening in the halls of power in these countries, Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia? Or do you think this is much ado about nothing?
Yeah, look, the history of the region for the last 100 years tells us this is nothing. The West imposed regimes in World War I and before World War I in the region, and those regimes pretended that they defended Palestine even after World War I, and pretended in 1948 to have helped Palestine in the supposed Arab-Israeli war. And all of that turned out to be propaganda and theatrics played with the Zionists. Okay. And just to maintain these regimes that survived the Arab revolutions after World War II. So right now, after destroying every country that actually fought against the Zionists, do you think suddenly the Saudis, the Turks, or the Sisi regime in Egypt will become enemies of the Zionists? They are just tools. They're vassals. They can never outrun. What we saw happening in Yemen may be viewed as kind of a theatrics play in front of Master in the White House about who's number 2 thug in the region on behalf of the empire other than Israel. For instance, that's as far as I can think about it. In fact, I think about it in a different way. I think about it is actually, the Emirates. When people talk about the Emirates, intervening in Yemen or Somalia or Sudan or the Congo or Libya, people should really understand that there's only 800,000 Emiratis. And half of them are inbred, drug-laden, syphilis-infected emirs. Okay? What's happening is actually the money of the Emirates is being manipulated by the Israelis or the Americans to play their game. So it's not really, there's no such thing as the Emirates having any real say in what's happening in Yemen or Somalia or others. It's their money that is being managed by the Zionist Jews, like the Kushners and others, that have control of these syphilis-infested emirs. Okay? So in Yemen specifically, what happened is that because all these militias managed by Emirati and Saudi and other money were ineffective in defeating Ansarullah and the government of Sana'a, there had to be now end of this battle in a different way, and that is to secede the south of Yemen. They want to create, this is what the empire, the Zionists think is the best way right now to deal with Ansarullah and Sana'a, is to have a separated secessionist government in all of South Lebanon that all of them will acknowledge, and then there will be South Yemen again. And then that South Yemen government will attack Yemen, the north, Sana'a. This is it. Similar with what was happening in Somalia, people talking about Somaliland being controlled by the Emirates and the Israelis, and Turkey coming to the aid of Mogadishu, federal government of Somalia. And I'm like, really? Really? It doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. This is all theatrics.
You know, since we're on the subject of the UAE, yesterday the Cradle published an explosive article. I don't know if you've seen this, Laith. I'll just put the headline up on the screen here. Leaked documents reveal UAE proposal to back Israel's genocide in Gaza by all means necessary. This document was obtained by an outlet called Emirate Leaks, and it was a government proposal to use UAE bases in the Red Sea to provide direct military intelligence and logistical support to Israel throughout its genocidal war in Gaza. The document dates back to October 2023 and is addressed to the Joint Operations Command of the UAE Armed Forces. I'm quoting here from the document, or the Cradle is quoting, with the 7th October terrorist attacks on the sister state of Israel, and based on the historic agreement stipulating cooperation between the two countries and an implementation of the order issued by the UAE Joint Operations Command to support the state of Israel through military bases in the southern Red Sea region, swift preparations and readiness were undertaken to provide our military bases in the southern Red Sea, especially in Yemen, with everything necessary to support the state of Israel. Can you talk to us a little bit about this thing called the UAE, Laith? Is it even a country? I mean, I'm starting to think it's nothing more than a front for the Mossad.
Yes, of course. You know, most people don't remember this, didn't read the history of the region. But, you know, the area that is called now the United Arab Emirates was occupied and colonized by the Portuguese in the late 1600s. Okay, and they put a few forts there to fight off the bandits and the pirates, because that's, you know, it's just a sand, you know, lot. It was originally, or was always known as the desert of Oman. It's part of Oman as a cultural, you know, sphere. Okay. And then it was colonized and occupied by the British as their war with the Portuguese pushed the Portuguese out of West Asia and South Asia. So what we know as the United Arab Emirates, when it was fabricated by the British in the middle of the 70s, in 1974, I believe, this was a response to all the successful Arabic revolutions that swept from beginning with Syria in 1942 and ending with Libya and Algeria. The US, the UK rushed to fabricate a state called the United Arab Emirates, and at the time their population was 40-something thousand people. A few nomadic tribes that are actually from Najd, that go back and forth, that were settled there, extensions of the Saud family, basically, into the Emirates and fabricated. And when we say somebody is Emirati, that's a name that doesn't exist. It means somebody is Principalitarian. Can you imagine that? In Arabic, it doesn't make sense. In English, it doesn't make sense. Instead of, let's say, you know, American, you would say Statian. You see, it's really weird. So this is a fabricated country. It doesn't exist. Even this leaked paper. Think about it. A country that currently has a population of 800,000 that doesn't have forced conscription. How much is its military force? Okay. What can the Emirates do? What the Emirates is actually offering is saying, hey, Zionist Jew that actually already controls my portfolio, my investment portfolio, and my whole national wealth. Boss, you can do whatever you want to with this money. You're already doing anything you want to. But let me put it in writing just for prosperity, for the next Zionist Jew that's going to control my portfolio to know that I kissed your hand and offered you something that doesn't exist, which is my military prowess, apparently, as the emirate with 800,000 population.
Right. So finally, let's talk about the current situation in Palestine, Laith. How do you assess the level of political stability in the Zionist entity right now? You know, there are a lot of scandals swirling around the maniac, the genocidal maniac Netanyahu, including one involving what appear to be bribes from Qatar to people in his inner circle, in Netanyahu's inner circle. You know, there are a lot of reports about the decrepit state of the Israeli military, you know, a suicide crisis, a mental health crisis, depleted weapon stocks, and yet he's out here doing everything he can to provoke another war with the Islamic Republic. Do you think that this regime can last much longer under current circumstances? He's also facing various, he's got to go to an election in the months ahead. You know, the fight over conscription of Orthodox Jews seems to be intensifying. The police are engaging, the Israeli police, in ever more brutal forms of repression of Orthodox Jews who are opposed to conscription. So how do you assess the stability of the genocidal entity at this particular moment?
Yeah, obviously, one of those things that maybe you missed was the judge responsible for the case against Netanyahu for corruption supposedly just died in a car accident. So the country is definitely at the edge of collapse, but let's not you know, count our chickens or exaggerate that. Why I say this is because they have the unlimited resources of the Gulf vassals, the unlimited resources of the West to do whatever they want to, as they wish. And there's no any limits to the depravity or their crimes that they can commit. Okay? So let's say a war breaks out with the Zionists and Iran, and or with Lebanon. And mass casualties of Zionist settlers become as a result of it. Let's say Iran actually goes 10 times hard of what it did in the 12-day war from day one. And there's mass deaths of Zionists and mass destruction. Well, very clearly the Zionists believe that they have the green light from all their vassals and from all their masters to use a nuclear weapon. Okay? So that's different than thinking that the country is going to collapse, right? Yes, there's all those problems that we're talking about. Yes, the whole West is also at the edge. Yes, fascism is breaking out inside the West. Yes, there could be a civil war in many countries, like in the West. But will that stop the Zionists from using a nuclear weapon? I don't think so. So at this moment, most probably those in Iran that are calculating the military strategy of what's going to come next have put that in their mind, that there could be the use of a nuclear weapon either by the United States or Israel if the Zionists get a clobbering that's going to lead to the collapse of their state. And therefore, those same strategists in the military of Iran must be calculating how to actually end Israel, even if and when it uses a nuclear weapon against Iran.
You know, I've been thinking a lot lately, Laith, about the timing of this fake ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and why it was entered into in October. And while I say fake, I mean, of course, that every single day Israel has violated the ceasefire 6 ways from Sunday. But there's no question that the level of killing has dropped dramatically since then. Whereas before Israel was killing, who knows, anywhere from 100 to 200 people per day on average. The number has dropped to around 5. I did the math recently. And so they've managed to, with the, enthusiastic support of the corporate media, to basically bury the story of the ongoing genocide in Gaza. And I started thinking about why they did that then in October. I think there were a variety of reasons, but I think that one of the reasons is that the midterms were a little more than a year away in the United States. And this was going to potentially complicate enormously the ability of the Republicans, just as it hurt the Democrats severely in last year's election, the genocide and support for the genocide, that it was potentially going to hurt the Republicans. And so they just decided to do this deal in part to, bury the story and allow the memory of it to kind of recede before they went to the polls, Americans. And also, the Israelis, their 10-year deal that Obama negotiated for military aid is going to be expiring soon. And they're going to have to negotiate that, a new deal with the Trump regime. And all of this is happening at the same time as prominent voices on the right, and I'm thinking primarily of Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, and to a lesser degree, Megyn Kelly, also the comedian Dave Smith, are all eviscerating Israel. Like, it's amazing to hear what they're saying. I never thought I would live to see people of that political persuasion in the United States say the things that they're saying about Israel. So I guess I'm curious what your current feeling is about the political challenges confronting the Zionist entity in the United States at this particular point in time. And specifically, what do you think is going to happen given I think it's a very significant change in the right-wing discourse around Israel. What do you think is going to happen around this military aid deal? I'm hearing that, the Israelis are looking for like a 20-year deal and $100 billion, some insane number like that. It's hard to believe that, this is going to pass without strong opposition from the voters. What's your expectation there?
Look, I definitely agree that there's a huge shift in the pundits' positionality in the right wing in the United States, like Tucker Carlson and others. But let's be clear. In my mind, talk is cheap, and talk sometimes is very theatric, is controlled opposition. It's like Turkey and the Saudis or Egyptians, as we talked before, saying something against Israel, or Turkey talking about the genocide. Turkey is supplying the genocide. So in a way, until now, we haven't seen any true schism happening that is action, not talk. And this is a country where forming a militia and carrying arms are a constitutional right. I haven't heard somebody like Tucker Carlson call for the formation of an anti-Zionist militia, for instance, right? So up until now, this is irrelevant. Especially if I was a Zionist or I'm Trump, I wouldn't give a damn about anyone in the United States, not even the opinion of the most listened to podcasters or whatever it is, because who cares? The US population is docile. There's a fascist brown shirts in the streets and nobody's doing anything. The same thing for the left, by the way, the leftovers. Again, you're in a country in the United States where you have a constitutional right to form a militia. Why aren't the Somali Americans of Minnesota forming a legal registered militia and carrying arms and defending their communities? Why is the Latin American, why is the left in the United States not doing that? And therefore, again, none of these things, to the Zionists and the imperialists, it doesn't matter anymore what we all say. Do they have any true opposition that's going to threaten their positionality? No. You're going to have another demonstration, come out, we'll shoot you also in the demonstration, and you're going to shut up. We're going to kill a white lady, mother of 3 children, as she's coming back from bringing her kid to school, and out in the open, and the president is going to come out and is going to call her names, and you're going to do nothing. As left, as white, right, women's rights, whatever it is. So action is what's important, and up until now, even those right-wing pundits have stayed within the line. And these are pundits that talk about the right to carry weapons all the time. They haven't yet called for the formation of a militia, therefore they're irrelevant in my mind. To the imperialists and the Zionists, at least.
Right. Well, one thing's for sure, they don't give a damn about peaceful protest in the halls of power in the West, that's for sure. So always fascinating to talk with you, Laith, and thank you for being generous with your time today. And we look forward to our next conversation, and please stay safe. By the way, please let people know now where they can find your excellent work.
You're going to like our latest piece. We just released it. It's called "The Greeks in the Mountains That Defeated the Nazis." And we just produced this documentary. It took us a while. It needed a lot of historical footage and so on. So it's not the usual field report. And we went to Lamia and Gorgopotomos, and we filmed from, Lamia is the hometown of the most famous communist and anti-imperialist rebel in the history of Greece, Aris Velochiotis. And Gorgopotomos was the location where the Greek resistance, communist resistance, was able to stop the advances of the Nazis, basically, into the Levant. So people can watch this. I remind everybody that we are totally demonetized on all platforms, and our only source of funding is donations, the generous donations from our viewers. People can go to our website, freepalestine.video, to donate and to find all our social media links so they can watch this content. And I hope you and our Greek brothers and sisters are going to like this documentary.
Definitely will watch it. Thank you for pointing out that this is now available. I'm going to put a link to it in the description to this video. And by the way, if you found this discussion today with Laith to be informative, please like and share this video. Please become a subscriber of Reason to Resist, and if you're not, one of Free Palestine TV as well. And by the way, we have a Rumble channel on Reason to Resist, which we've set up as a backup plan. So it has the same name, Reason to Resist. Please subscribe to that too, so that if the YouTube censors come after us one day, hopefully that won't happen, we'll have another way to reach you. Signing off today from Beirut, Lebanon, and Montreal, Canada, for Reason to Resist. Peace out.